This episode of Pick Up the Six podcast is brought to you by Everyman Jack. If you haven't heard of them, they're a men's grooming company that creates some of the highest performing, best smelling products on the market. They believe it's not just about what you put in your body that matters, but what you put on your body. From their body wash to deodorant to beard oil and more. They're made with naturally derived ingredients and incredibly outdoorsy scents that bring the best of nature to their bottles and bars. I'm a huge fan of all their stuff. The sandalwood scent, probably my favorite of all the things they have. And it's literally in my shower right now. So here's what you do. Head to everymanjack.com today and use our special promo code PUT6, PUT and the number 6 for 25% off on orders of $50 or more. Making small changes to your routine, even in the shower, can have a significant impact. And Everyman Jack makes that easy. Everyman Jack, naturally derived, outdoor inspired. We're also sponsored by Amino Vitals. Amino Vitals' mission is to provide the highest quality of amino acid-based nutritional products to all athletes aspiring to improve their conditioning and performance. The BCAAs, glutamine and arginine, help replenish the body's muscle proteins and jumpstart the recovery process. I've been using Amino Vital since last fall, got introduced to them, and I see a positive impact from their action and recovery products. It helps me just get rid of some of those, aches and pains that come with a tough workout. Hit up amino-vital.com, use the code PUT6 at checkout and save 20%, or just click on their link on the show page and save today. Do you ever strike up a conversation with someone and less than 5 minutes in, you're like, thank you, God, for intervening and bringing us together? That's exactly how I felt after about 2 minutes of recording this podcast with today's guest, Colonel Nick Nichols, an Air Force veteran and F-16 pilot who continues his service with Folds of Honor. Let's meet Colonel Nichols and hear more about the mission of Folds of Honor to support military and first responder families. This is Pick Up the Six podcast. Hey guys, Brian Jodas back once again for another episode of Pick Up the Six podcast. An additional shout out to our sponsors. Thanks so much for keeping some wind in the sails of this pirate ship here. No joke, had Everyman Jack in the shower this morning, the product, of course. Just got a brand new shipment from those guys. And so legit, spend over $50 at everymanjack.com. You need to stay clean. You need to get some good naturally derived shampoo and ingredients and all that stuff. You spend over $50. Use that code Pick Up the Six, PUT6. You save 25% off a great product. They're awesome. Got Amino Vitals in the water bottle for after the gym today, so we'll get some BCAAs in. So legit, not just telling you guys to use this stuff. I'm using it every day, and we're grateful for them and their partnership. And also just grateful for you being a part of this Pick Up the Six mission here. We're here to create purpose-driven stories. We do that through our production company, with the projects that we team up with our clients and partners. And then we do that through the podcast here. And so we're just thrilled to share stories and introduce you to great people like Colonel Nick Nichols from Folds of Honor, who joins us today. So Nick, just grateful to have you, man. Happy Friday as we record. We'll release this show next week, but man, just thrilled to have you on.
Thanks, brother. I'm glad to be here. Honored to be here, Brian. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Dude, thrilled to get to know you, get to know more about Folds of Honor. I've known about your organization for a couple of years and finally get a chance just to hear about the great work you're doing through scholarshiping, through supporting military families, first responder families now as well. So we're going to talk a lot about that. And then I get the feeling you and I have some things in common, man. I'm digging through your bio, right? We've got different career divergent paths, but we've also probably been through some shared experiences with what our fathers have done. So just tell me about Nick Nichols, man, this journey, right? You end up in the Air Force, fighter pilot in F-16, 7 combat tours of Afghanistan, Iraq, group commander. So you got some similarities to my old man there, but then you and I have been in and around some similar things as well. So just let's get to know you a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, thanks, Brian. Thank you to your audience. Super excited to be here. So for those of you out there who had military dads or military moms, you know what military life is like, right? It's super cool on one end and can maybe suck a little bit on the other end, right? Because
that's
every 3 years,
right?
The things and stuff. But I had the privilege of a dad who was just an absolute hero. He was my mentor, my guiding light, who at an early age got me on the direction and a path, not forcibly anyway, but knew I wanted to be a fighter pilot. So my family's background, so, my mom and dad, they met when my dad was at the Air Force Academy, played football there, graduated in 1966. And then after that, he was off to pilot training and all the things, and did his first tour in Vietnam in 1967. I was like all of 2 months old at that time in my life and stuff. And little did I know, and a lot of this I learned later in life. Obviously, you're not processing this stuff when you're a little kid and everything else, and didn't realize till much later how much of a hero my dad really was. And one of the cool stories that I remember was he was on a close air support mission. And for the audience if you don't know what that is, that's basically he's supporting the Army guys on the ground, right?
Yeah, they got boots on the ground, and the Air Force is coming in.
Boots on the ground, and things are going bad, right?
What are they flying, Nick? What's he flying? Is it F4 over Vietnam?
Yeah. Okay, so he's flying at this time. He's flying the F-100, right? Which I think, and we'll talk about his planes and stuff here in a little bit. But I think by far that was his favorite fighter ever. So he's providing close air support. They're trying to medevac a bunch of Army guys out of there. Gone bad. And my dad is the lead of a 2-ship, doing close air support. So they're dropping bombs, they're doing all the things to get these guys out of there. And my dad takes AAA fire. Okay, so AAA anti-aircraft artillery airplane catches on fire. My dad stays on station to make sure these guys get evac'd out of there, and they do. But his plane's on fire, so they go. In Vietnam, the guys always try to get feet wet, right? That means they want to get out over the ocean, okay, get away from getting captured, becoming a POW, and all that stuff. And so he does. Again, now, remember, plane's on fire. He's limping a single engine fighter jet out over the ocean, punches out. But when he punches out, it is literally a Top Gun Goose type scenario where he hits something as he ejects and dislocates his shoulder. Plus, his back is burned. So he ejects, hits the water. When he hits the water, none of his flotation gear works. Not a single one.
Yeah, that's a problem. That's going to be a big problem.
That's a big problem. I mean, when flying combat missions too, I mean, you've got your survival vest on, obviously you got your helmet, you got all this stuff on, right? So it's like trying to jump in a swimming pool.
Those are single seaters, those fighters?
Yeah, the F-100 was a single seater. So he's got nobody with him. And if you can imagine having that much gear on, getting in the water and trying to swim, it ain't going to happen, right? I don't care how good of a swimmer you are. And so he's drowning. So happens at this point in time, an Army helo, okay, not a rescue helo, an Army helo, the door gunner sees my dad, okay, sees him punch out and tells the pilot, hey, spin around over here. So this door gunner, who, by the way, my dad never got to meet in his entire life, jumps out of the helo, dives down, unhooks my dad, rescues him, and gets him in the helicopter.
What?
I mean, unbelievable story,
That's
right?
Unbelievable.
And, what's funny here is I had heard bits and pieces of all this stuff, throughout my life, and never really put it together. And I'll get, a little bit further in the story here in just a second. But I mean, what an unbelievable legacy. So dad received a Purple Heart out of that, Distinguished Flying Cross, and super, super cool story to have in our family. And, it's awesome opportunities like this to keep his legacy and his memory alive, which is neat. And, the interesting thing here is that, that was the first time my mom literally got the knock on the door, uniformed guy there, literally gave her a heart attack. Here she is, 23 years old at home with me, who's a baby at the time. And, hey, we just want to let you know that your husband's okay. And she's like, I'm on explain the expletives that she gave this poor officer that was at the door. But, hey, maybe not show up like that. Give me a phone call or something.
Give me a phone call first before the boys in uniform come walking up the front steps, because during that elevated time, right, with all that activity, you see them walking towards your house. The first thought is it's the worst news.
Oh yeah, it's going to be the worst news, right? But it was obviously it was good news. And, my dad, being the tough, stubborn guy that he was, refused to come home. So he healed up there in Vietnam and stayed and kept flying until he hit his 100 combat missions in
Wow.
and then rotated like he was supposed to.
Hey, Nick, tell me
Yeah.
his name. I didn't ask you off the top, but let's hear his
So
name.
we had the exact same name.
Same name.
So James Richard Nichols, okay, is actually both of our names. I'm Junior. Okay, his fighter pilot call sign was Nick, and so I ended up with Nick as my call sign, as a legacy call sign, which is really, really cool.
It's pretty incredible. All right, so at 15 years old, though, you lose him, and that's got to be a pretty tough, traumatic time to me. I mean, let's lean in here if you don't mind, because you've told us this incredible
Yeah.
story about what he does in that act of heroism. That God, for that helo to be there in that moment, the guy to get eyes on him, to just jump in the drink and go save him. I mean, that's an incredible story in and of itself. But you talked about being able to share it and keep that legacy alive, and then you're not very old when you do lose him.
No, no. So we're living overseas in Cairo, Egypt, and at this time, my dad is flying F-16s. He was one of the original guys in the F-16,
Nice.
the same jet that I've
Yep.
for almost 30 years, which is a really cool connection. And over there, getting the Egyptian Air Force set up flying the F-16. And there was one evening we're at home. We're living in this little like bungalow in a place called Madi, Egypt, which is just outside of Cairo. And my dad was supposed to be home like around 6:30, 7 o'clock. My mom was getting all ready. They were supposed to go to the dinner at like the embassy or something like that night. And nothing. He was never late. He was always home on time and stuff. So my mom was getting worried. I could tell she was getting worried. And she started making some phone calls and some other things. And then all of a sudden you hear, and I remember going to the door and, I was standing next to my mom and stuff like that. And then you hear the words, hey, Sandy, we're sorry to tell you, but, your husband has been found dead, was killed in a car wreck and stuff. And then I just, I stand there and just watch my mom collapse and screaming and stuff like that. And this is about, now it's about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. Right. And I'm the oldest, I'm 15. But then I've got my 12-year-old sister and my 7-year-old brother upstairs who have no idea what's going on right now.
Yeah.
And stuff. And, that night's a little bit of a blur. It's a combination of me and my mom, talking to my sister and brother and what's going on and all that other stuff. And then, of course, a flood of people in the house, military takes care of military. Everybody's there making sure we're okay. And then there's just the throes of, packing our stuff, getting out of there, living in a foreign country.
Yeah.
My mom obviously wanted to get back to people she was familiar with and we were familiar with. So we get back to my grandparents who lived in Florida. And then, a couple of weeks after that, and again, this happened on December 11th, 1982. So 2 weeks before Christmas, right? Yeah. So next thing I know, just before Christmas, I'm the lead pallbearer in my dad's funeral. And at this point, I hadn't really processed it. I was angry, right? I was super angry.
Sure.
God, right? Like, man, here's my dad, survives 2 tours in Vietnam, Silver Star, all the things, right? 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and kind of processing, man, how do you car wreck? Really? And, but I hadn't cried at all. I hadn't cried. And so, as the funeral goes on and stuff, there's 2 flyovers that happen, a missing man formation. So that's when number 3 formation goes straight up. There's a missing man formation of 4 ship of F4s, followed by a 4 ship of F-16s, and then taps, right? And that's when it hit me. It was like that's when like the finality of it comes through. And you're like, man, what do we do?
Like, he's not coming back. Like, and you're kind of
he's not coming back.
You're sort of bewildered for those first few weeks, right? Like, this isn't real. This can't be real.
No, it's the permanency of it too, right? And stuff. You're just looking at it, like I said, super angry with God, the world, and everything that had gone on there, and you're just left there to pick up the pieces. And again, for a while, the military is great, everybody's around you and stuff like that, but then there's that lull that happens 2, 3, 6 months down the road where you realize that, okay, we got to figure stuff out, and that was, obviously a core memory, a pivotal point in my life. And that, further sent me on a trajectory. But, I knew at that time, it really solidified in me my passion and my desire to be a fighter pilot, and more importantly, to appropriately carry on the legacy of my dad's name.
So that was going to be my next question. Was my guess is, from as long as you could remember until that moment, your hair's on fire to be a fighter pilot, right? It sounds to me like you grew up knowing that. And my question was, did it push you more towards it, or did it push you away from it? Because I could see how both could happen, but it sounds like you were like, I'm all in now, no doubt.
Yeah, and in our disciplines and our passions, even though they're solid, they can ebb and flow through life, right?
Sure.
I'm not as disciplined, this morning as I was yesterday morning, right, with my routines and stuff like that. It was always there in the back of my mind. But yeah, I mean, I was a teenager, and and kind of lost a little bit because literally my dad was my best friend and stuff. And so there's a lot of stuff that I always did, but I quit. I quit playing all sports and stuff like that. I was a really good football player, just kind of quit doing everything. And school was super easy for me in high school. Didn't really have to try and stuff. And but then I remember I got into college, and like a lot of freshmen, that first semester in college was not impressive. Okay, just to say the least. You start finding stuff like beer and girls and stuff like that, and it's a major distraction. And I remember I got my my grades at the end of that first semester, and I looked at that, and it was embarrassing, and didn't really want to talk to my mom about it and stuff like that. But I had like this kind of an epiphany. I'm like, man, if you had to sit down and talk to your dad right now and tell him that you were using him as an excuse for your failures,
he'd be pissed.
Do that. He'd be pissed.
He'd be
right?
pissed. Yeah.
And so it was at that point I was like, man, I got to get my act together, right? And it's like God flipped a switch in my brain at that point. And then and I cultivated disciplines at that point that literally I have today, and have never wavered from them and stuff. And it got me going on the right track. Got me on the path.
Did you get what way did you go through? Meaning, did you get your F-16 assignment in a traditional squadron night where you find out what your aircraft is going to be? How did that happen for you? The reason I ask is, he's been in that plane. To then get that plane, there's something incredible about that. And I liken it to my friend John Quartz, who's been on this podcast, whose dad, Teak, was killed on the first night of Desert Storm, flying in an F-15. And then John later, as he goes through pilot training and gets assignment, sees the F-15 put up on that PowerPoint slide up on that screen on that night. Similar experience for you, and just the weight of being in that aircraft.
It was, it was funny because I remember, I didn't go to the Air Force Academy. I was an ROTC guy in college and stuff. Not necessarily apologizing for that. I just never really tried with the Academy.
Lieutenant General Ralph Jodas, 36 and a half years. Didn't go to the Air Force Academy either. Had a pretty damn good Air Force career.
But there's sort of this mindset, right? Like, hey, you're going to pilot training, competing with these academy guys and stuff like that. And I remember, and I'll give you a little bit of a backstory, then I'll answer your question there.
Sure.
But I remember showing up pilot training, right? And I just got married. I'm 22 years old, right? And, my wife of 34 years still with me. Her name's Carrie. And I remember, so it's the first night there. So you're kind of meeting everybody, and we're probably one of maybe 7 or 8 married couples that are there and stuff. But I'm meeting all these guys and talking to them and stuff. And like a lot of these guys, Air Force Academy grads, MIT grads, Harvard grads, and all this, and all these guys with like tons of flying experience and all this other stuff. And I remember going back that night and I'm like, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? I am like totally in the wrong place. But I remember something my dad taught me a long time ago. He's like, hey, dude, take one day at a time. Okay. You don't have to solve world hunger in one day at a time, right? Just one more rep, one more thing. You can do this. And the one thing that I always remembered that he taught me, he goes, you're always going to find people. And this was really in the context of football, that are stronger, faster, more athletic, and all the other things. He goes, but the 2 things you can control, your attitude and your work ethic. Okay. Don't let anybody outwork you. And so it was another epiphany in my life. I'm like, don't let this stuff intimidate you. Who cares, right? And
and let them let them find out. Let them find out. I'll show you my work. I don't need to tell you.
That's exactly right. And the other confidence building thing was, constant reminders, like, talking to myself, it's like, hey man, you got warrior's blood running through your veins. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's got to mean something. So so that night, after all of that, get to the end of pilot training and everything else, and to be able to walk out the gates of Shepherd Air Force Base knowing I was going to go fly the fighter of my dream was a really, really big deal.
Shout out Wichita Falls, Texas. It's where I met my wife, man, working at KUZ TV. If you ever watch local television, when you were at Shepherd, I worked at that CBS affiliate. It's where Liz and I met. My dad was NJEP commander there in the mid 2000s-ish. My brother graduated from Burke Burnett High School, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, bro. Yeah. So I knew, I was like, you know what? I don't know much about Nick coming into this call, this podcast, but I was like, something just feels like we're about to start just ticking off stuff. So I spent a couple years in Wichita Falls, man. I loved it there. It was great.
Some common ground, right?
That's where those horns are from, Bo.
All right.
Wichita Falls.
All right.
That's awesome.
That's good.
All right. So you get the F-16, man, 7 combat tours, right? Just a great career. I do want to get the folds of honor, man. Just talk about the work you guys are doing now, but just having that career, being able to do that, right? Carry that legacy throughout. What's it mean to you?
It means everything. In fact, it took a little trip down memory lane yesterday. To my bros who are still in, and they're getting spun up, getting ready to go do the deed somewhere in some foreign land that they can't talk about, obviously, and stuff. But it brings back all the memories. There is something about being an operator and that brotherhood and stuff that is irreplaceable. Yeah. Very thankful I got to do that for 30 years. Stayed in the F-16 the entire time. The combat tours were both amazing and tragic. But it was a privilege to be able to do that, at the end, and not in an arrogant, beating your chest way and stuff like that. I mean, I was honored to be able to do it, and I'm very thankful, lucky in a lot of ways and stuff, but the most powerful thing within that 30-year career was I had an amazing wife. Okay. And you can't do it without them, man. And it's funny because, like combat tour number 6 was supposed to be the last one. And then we got spun up. I did not have to go. Okay. But there was no way I could not go. And so I talked to her and she's like, of course. And, the funny thing is that was really the first time I ever asked her about it. And I never really asked her if this life was okay. It just kind of always was, never complained. We have 3 amazing grown functioning adults who are all college graduates and jobs and awesome significant others and that type of stuff. So yes, it was a storybook career.
It's one of I'm grateful for so many things about, your life, and just to be able to hear that. And then, just there is a lot in that. I mean, I watched my dad throughout the 36 and a half years of his career, make incredible strides on behalf of his career and our nation, right? Our family, his faith, and our nation, and do these amazing things. And who was there every single step of the way? Right? Mom's there every step of the way.
You bet.
Right. And there's to your point about going to your wife on that last one, my folks had thousands of conversations I know nothing about those moments and what that next thing would look like. And boy, I got to do this year remote to Korea. And, if the family comes with me, we can stay for 2 years, but we really don't want to move the boys for 2 years to Seoul, Korea. So I'm going to have to just roll solo for a year and do this. Or, that late assignment of mom's back at home while dad's at the KAOK, during Operation Unified Protector with eyes on Libya, command of the no-fly zone. But having to do that together from afar, it's an amazing, and they listen to all these shows. So I just love you guys. I'm grateful for it. It is an amazing point of that. And in which the warrior needs that anchor at home, man, whether it's a male fighter pilot or the females, right? There's just something to that, right?
Yeah, 100%. And, part of the story that I didn't tell here, and you can probably maybe guess just a little bit, but guess where I met my wife? In Cairo, Egypt. We're boyfriend
Get
and
out of here.
girlfriend at 15 and 14 years old. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So so she knew my dad. And so
Yeah.
we got reconnected in college.
Wait
And
a
she had
minute.
actually,
And so you knew each other then.
yes.
She saw, but you're just friends at the time, right?
Yeah, but no, we were whatever a boyfriend and girlfriend are at 15 and
At
14 years
15,
old.
right?
What's
But
that
she's
like?
your
Right?
girlfriend during that whole experience.
She is.
And
She
then you go
is.
your separate ways for a little bit.
We do, and she ends up. Her dad's in the military. They end up in San Antonio, Texas. I'm in Valdosta, Georgia, going to college, and she tracks me down and says, "Hey, our school from
Dang it.
Cairo is having a reunion. Would you like to come?" And I'm a poor college student, right? I mean, I'm working 40 hours a week, putting myself through college. I was like, "There's no way I can make this happen," but I'm like, "Man, I really want to see her."
Yeah.
So I just
I
bought a
bet you did.
radio. I just bought a radio, right? Like this boombox thing, like back in the day, right? And I'm
Would
like,
you
all
John
right,
Cusack it and go to
yeah, 100%. But I'm like, all right, I need the money, so I hawked it. I took it down to a pawn shop, sold it, was able to buy a plane ticket and stuff, and met her in San Antonio. And it's back in the day where they could like meet you at the plane, right?
Oh
And get
yeah.
out the
Yeah, yeah,
plane.
yeah. Used to
Like,
walk people to the gate. Like, see you later.
yeah,
Just stand there and watch them fly away. It was wild.
it was like, okay, wow, she is way hot. And I'm like, this
Looking
was
good after those couple of years. Yeah.
this was a good idea. And man, 2 weeks later, we were engaged.
What?
And yeah, and that's the rest of the story.
Dude, God is amazing. Right.
Yeah.
So look, those early days of losing your dad, you're like, why did you do this to me? How could you do this to me? And it's hard. And of course you want him back, but the orchestration of what your life then ends up being at his divine intervention, I believe, that's
Amen.
amazing, man. God, I'm so glad we're doing. I had no idea we were going to talk about all this stuff. This is the beauty of this podcast. A lot of times I've got we had General Livingston on, Major General Livingston, gold, Medal of Honor recipient. I was pretty measured on every beat we're going to talk about. We're going to go through Battle of Dido, which, by the way, if you haven't listened to that show from a couple weeks ago, it's phenomenal. This man is a Marine standing there commanding 30 other Marines against, no joke, hundreds of ECs. And he says to the guys, fix bayonets. I mean, who are these guys? It's amazing. Anyways, that was the Measure Out story. I'm like, I got some tidbits and we're going to talk about this amazing organization. And the front half of this conversation has just been like, I'm emotional, man, just listening to you because it's just such a cool thing. But hopefully it's a good reminder for you guys. Like, there's so much good stuff out there. God's got a great hand on what we're doing in our lives, and we don't get to dictate it. And we're not even privy to the plan. We're not even privy to the plan. You just got to trust, have faith. That's amazing.
Trust. Yeah. One day at a time. One day at a time.
One day at a time. That's right. All right, man. So great career. Thankful for all you've done on behalf of our nation and for what you continue to do. So how do you get hooked up with this great group called Folds of Honor? Tell us the mission, right? How's this thing get started? What are you guys doing? How do you get there?
All right. So I'll talk about my connection to the Folds and then what we do. How about that? So
great.
Lieutenant Colonel Dan Rooney, our CEO and founder, started this back in around the 2006 timeframe. In 2007, became an official nonprofit. But Dan and I flew F-16s together. So we were bros in the fighter squadron here in the Oklahoma Air National Guard. He actually flew his first combat sortie on my wing, as a young guy. So I was an instructor a few years older.
You guys have legitimately flown together. I mean,
we have legitimately flown together, legitimately flown in combat together and stuff, which is a super cool connection. And I don't know, it was like sometime around, I just got back from a combat tour. I can't even remember what year it was. It was around 2007, 2008. And I was big into CrossFit, right? And so, hey, we're having this little fundraiser. And I asked Dan to come out. And I was like, hey, can you speak to the folks and stuff like that? And actually, it was later than that. It was around 2014. And he did. And we started talking. We walked out. He goes, hey, man, I don't know when you're looking at retirement and stuff, but when you do, look me up, let's talk and, see if there's a spot for you and stuff like that. And, lo and behold, we started getting serious talking about it in 2017 and 2018. When I retired, I stepped into the Folds of Honor. So what do? So we provide educational scholarships to the spouses and kids of military members and now first responders who have either been killed or disabled. So to date in our, doing some math here, about 15, 16 years in existence, got about 44,000 scholarships out the door.
Wow.
That's $220 million.
Whoa.
And we kiddos in all 50 states, representative of all the branches. And it's super cool. For me, because like when you get out of the military, it's super weird, right? You're like, man, I've spent the last 30 years, wearing the green pajamas every day, going to work and stuff. Didn't really have to think about anything.
Green
And
pajamas is pretty good. This is a pretty good explanation of a flight suit.
they are. I mean, and you're like, okay, what now? There's, the bros are gone, but they're not gone. It's just different, right? You're not in the fight anymore. And that was tough, but having a place now to serve, like, give back to others is wildly important to me.
Mm-hmm.
And also, my wife and I talk about this all the time. Never taking for granted one day that I got to come home.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yeah.
I'm living, I'm breathing.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got some, all the stuff that happens to fighter pilots, neck, back, all the other things and everything else, but I'm walking and breathing and I'm upright. And shame on me if I don't wake up each and every day, making sure that these families who have lost somebody have somebody fighting for them.
What are they using those scholarships for? I mean, how are they helping them?
Great question. So we have two funds. So a third of our funds go to what's called a children's fund. Okay. And these are for really hard situations like the loss of the military member, especially with young families and stuff like that, severely disabled families where the military member or first responders no longer able to work. And we support getting kiddos into a private school context if they need it. A lot of times it's very helpful to the families to be able to do that. And a lot of times the private schools just maybe have some additional resources that other schools may not to help not only, obviously with their education is important, but it's a healing process, right? And those kids need help now. They don't need help 10 years from now when they're eligible.
They can't wait. Yep.
They can't wait. So that fund is wildly important. 2/3 of our fund is called higher education. And that could be college. Okay. That could be a trade school. Hey, you want to be a plumber, an electrician, a pilot, you name it. We're going to support you in that as well. And our scholarships are typically $5,000 per school year. Okay. That doesn't cover everything. And we know that, but that, what, that's $5,000 a parent or a kiddo doesn't have to pay or go into debt for. But the neat thing is that once you're in our system, we got you to graduation. It's not like you're hoping.
Wow. That's a hell of a commitment, man.
It's a commitment and it's a fight, right. And so, and every year our commitment grows. We just closed our scholarship window, 12,500 applicants. It's a 30% increase from last year. That's a $62.5 million bill to get out the door and stuff like that. It, you could view it as a little bit scary. It's like, wow, that's a really big number. For me, it's a motivation, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, one more day, right? Fight today, do whatever you can to take care of these families. And that's what we do. We have an amazing team here. It's not just me. And we got a lot of, very passionate, powerful people out there raising funds on our behalf. And it's super exciting.
Dude, that's amazing. All right. Give us the data dump. Tell folks where they can go, because listeners are going to be like, all right, I need to help throw some resources into the coffers for these guys to help either these kids or I love this idea of the spouse too, right? Like military spouse, first responder spouse. Now you're faced with obviously this incredible challenge and hardship. Want to go back to school, right? Let us help you lighten that load. So give us a data dump, man. Tell us where they can find it, support, all that good stuff.
Yeah. So if you want to support us, okay, and I challenge you to take a look at us and vet us. You should do that with any money that you're giving a nonprofit, foldsofhonor.org. Okay. And foldsofhonor.org, click on our squadron tab. That's our affinity group. Okay. So join our squadron. It's $13 a month. Okay. You probably spent more at Starbucks this morning. Okay.
Yep.
$13 a month. And your folks are probably asking, well, why the number 13? Okay. This flag on my chest, that iconic triangle shape of freedom right there, takes exactly 13 folds to bring it to that shape. And if you can imagine, if we had 1 million people giving $13 a month, what we could do.
Yep.
It's a powerful statement. It's a price point that is achievable for most people out there. And we'd love for you to be in the fight. Hey, if you're in the military, you're a first responder and you've lost your military member or first responder, if they're disabled and can no longer work and stuff is going on, please check us out at foldsofhonor.org. Click on our scholarship tab. All the explanations are there if you qualify and that type of stuff. And if the answer isn't there for you, contact us. There's a button right there you can click, and my team will get back with you within 72 hours.
We started talking about legacy at the beginning. I got to think that old fighter pilot would be pretty proud of this effort and the way in which his extended legacy gets carried on through it.
It is, and here's kind of finish with the storytelling with this, unless you have any more questions, but here's what was really, really cool. So it was, I don't know, around the 2016 timeframe. I'm preparing for retirement and stuff like that. I was about 2 years into my group commander tour, and I was like, you get a little nostalgic, right? And I was calling my mom. I was like, Mom, hey, I've got Dad's shadow box. I've got his, you can see his silver star, his Purple Heart, and all that stuff. I'm like, do you have any of his citations? And she's like, baby, I don't. And the citations are the story that accompanies, the Silver Star and all those other things. Yep. And I'm like, man.
It's like when you watch those Medal of Honor recipient moments, and right, there's usually an officer that reads all the things that lead up to it. It brings color to what had happened.
Right. And like the citation is really the bulk of it, right? You want the story. I mean, having the medal is neat, but so I was like, all right, so I'm just going to start figuring it out. Anyways, so I called the National Archives, all right? And this older guy literally picked up the phone. I'm like, okay, this is amazing. This never happens at a government agency, right? And, I'd give my background, tell him my story. He goes, do you have your dad's social security number? I go, I do. And so I gave that to him, and he goes, okay, this is going to take me a long time. He goes, but I'm going to find him. All right. And lo and behold, a year later, comes in the mail, day before Father's Day.
Well, come on. Come on. All of it.
No, all of it. Every single story. So I remember going out to the mailbox, and there's this big, manila envelope. I pull it out and I look at the return address. I'm like, oh my God, this is it. And so I kind of felt the packet. I'm like, man, this is there's a lot of stuff in here. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to wait. I'm going to open it up tomorrow on Father's Day. So remember, I got up early, grabbed a cup of coffee, and just started at the top and started reading all the way through. And I'd always heard the stories about my dad from Vietnam, but they were just stories, right? But to see them on paper and go, oh my God, this is like literally, other than, meeting my wife and having my kids, was the greatest thing that ever happened in my life, is having those documents in my hand. And, it was the result of one guy who actually cared.
Who did it. Yeah. Yep. Golly, that's awesome. And you'll never meet that guy, right? You had a phone call. Had a phone call with him.
Yeah. And I had a phone call with him, gave him that. And I really was, not overly optimistic and stuff.
I wouldn't blame you. I mean, it's nice to hear that you're going to do it, but I mean, what are the chances? That's amazing.
What are the chances? But he delivered on everything and stuff. And so, so now it's neat, because now that's part of the Nichols family history that I can hand down to my kids, that they can hand down to their kids. And so his memory lives in perpetuity now. Right. Yeah. And it's good.
That's awesome. Their call sign is Nick. He's Colonel Nick Nichols, Folds of Honor. Amazing conversation day. I'm grateful. I'm just grateful. Like, what a way to spend the last 34 minutes. And we should be so lucky. Listeners at home, right? We should be so lucky. Amazing. Nick, it's been awesome, man.
Well, thank you very much, brother. And, to your audience out there and everything, thanks for listening and stuff. And something there that touched your heart, help us out at Folds of Honor, and we'd appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's foldsofhonor.org. His name is Colonel Nick Nichols. I'm Brian Jodas. That's been this episode of Pick Up the Six podcast.